So Briahna Joy Gray interviewed two people, and this was dropped like right before we went on. Her show drops an hour before ours. Hers comes on at 2 to 3 or sometime in that hour, and then we start at 3. So these two gentlemen, and let me show you their faces. These two gentlemen here are work for Marianne Williamson's presidential campaign. The one in the top left is from South Carolina. He's the state director for Marianne campaign in South Carolina, and the one in the bottom is from New Hampshire, and he's the state director from New Hampshire. So that's who these two people are. And the question she poses for her video is, can we win? And this is referring to Marianne Williamson. Like I said, it's an hour video. I already knew we had the Glenn Greenwald video, so I knew we couldn't watch all of it. So let's just go to the 3 points I have mentioned here. First one is 24. So let's listen to this first point in question.
To shut down the possibility of debates. So are they just waiting to see what the field looks like before they make a decision?
I honestly don't even think that has anything to do with who's running and who's not running. I think they just want to wait to the last possible minute so it doesn't encourage anybody else to jump in. And also, I think the undemocratic DNC that we have, they're just trying to like save face at this point because they know that this doesn't look good, their moves. So possibly waiting until the summer when everybody's distracted with the summer and all that kind of stuff and not focus on politics so much, perhaps. Maybe people will forget. So I honestly don't even think that has anything to do with candidates. I think Joe Biden is going to run and he's going to decide this summer and announce it. And they're going to wait till the last possible minute. And the reason is because Joe Biden, polls change day by day with Joe Biden. You know, he is probably one of the most unpopular Democrats to have run in recent history. 70% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run again. So, you know, it's worth it to the DNC to wait as long as possible to do anything that could possibly hurt them in this case, including changing fully the calendar, including having no debates, and including having Joe Biden run for president again. And this is coming from somebody, I supported Joe Biden wholeheartedly in 2020 after the primary season.
Of course he did.
I believe in democratic values, but I also believe in the democratic process. And if there are candidates that are better than Joe Biden running, such as Marianne Williamson, I am going to take a look at them and I am going to support them if that is what it takes. And I think there needs to be a democratic process. And we're going to raise as much hell as possible here in New Hampshire as New Hampshire Democrats to make sure that our voices are heard, that we're not silenced, and that we have a democratic process. This is really undemocratic what's happening.
Well, look, this is a question for both of you because I hear what you're saying, Carlos, but I would be remiss not to point out that there are.
Okay, so I have to calibrate. So let me explain. So I am a paying member for Bad Faith Podcast. So I get the audio version, and the audio version does have an intro edit on it. So I have to calibrate the number I wrote down to what the video is, because this is the question I had queued up from the audio. So now I know that it's about a minute off. So it's about a minute off of so now I know how to do this. So anyway, this is the question I was waiting for, Nick, for everybody to trying to queue up.
A lot of people listening to this show who don't feel so strongly about the Democratic Party, or they feel strongly about it, but in a negative way. And the reason is because they have seen the ways in which the Democratic Party has rigged elections to prevent progressives who frankly represent the interests of most Democratic voters from actually being successful within the Democratic Party. And you can go to Donna Brazil's admissions about the DNC rigging the election. You can go to the in-court statements where the DNC admitted it felt had no obligation to be fair and how it administered the 2016 election. You can point to any number of pieces of evidence for that proposition. But most people intuitively understand the way that Bernie was treated in both 2016 and 2020 makes them feel like even under the best circumstances with a close to ideal candidate, that the Democratic Party is simply not going to allow it to happen. So what do you say? And this is a question to both of you. Perhaps I'll start with you, Mercurius. What do you say to people who have the perspective that they fundamentally are distrustful of Marianne's candidacy, the viability of the candidacy, and also her understanding of how power works if you're still willing to work within the Democratic Party construct. Why?
The question is a great question because she lays it out good and, makes the point that I would make. Now, we might have added some other parts, but I just want to make the point that the setup of the question is pretty good, in my opinion. So let's continue.
That decision.
So for me, I would say, and I'm trying to
Now, you get how he's having a hard time. You know what I mean? If you ask me, hey, about Rome, I'm gonna start naming off a bunch of stuff. Yo, Rome do this, Rome library, blah blah blah, quickly. But you see how, hey, Democratic Party, these failures, she'd set it up, and then she says, so you how do we work with that? And he's like, well, it's an admission of, I'm selling you a pipe dream, sir. There's no other way to even address this, but to be, you have to sell a pipe dream yet again. And that's what I see in his sort of warming up to the question. But let's listen to what he says, actually.
Be respectful to everybody's points of views as possible. We know that the system is rigged. We know that they did this, everything that you just said. So we have, basically for me personally, we have a choice. We know the system is rigged. We can complain about the system being rigged, or we can try to find a way to fight harder, stronger, and better.
Donate more money. Donate more money. Fight hard. We need more labor hours. Apparently, Bernie 2020 wasn't enough. How is that an answer to the question? In fact, that's a horrible answer. So Bree mentions how the system was rigged and they screwed Bernie. And then she even mentioned how a lot of people like us see that how if Bernie in his amazing position couldn't win, how is Marianne going to win with significantly less grassroots support and without even the support of Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement? And his answer is, come on, man, with that fucking negativity. We just got to fucking fight harder. We just got to believe in positive vibes, the power of friendship. We can do it. We can do it. Fuck that negative shit. That is not an answer.
That's so funny. All right, let's listen to his answer in the next. And then she asked this question again because they ramble on. So I'm going to fast forward it again to when she and they kind of give slightly different answers, and then we'll move on from here. So let's listen.
And that's what we've had to do here in the South, because everything was rigged against us in the South. So Black people couldn't be in office, so we couldn't do stuff. So we have learned to find a way to fight harder, to fight smarter.
Dude, that's the second time. The first time came from Marianne Williamson herself.
Yeah, it came directly from her.
When she was asked, man, the chance of you winning this shit is pretty much slim to nil. Why are you doing this? She's like, man, the civil rights movement, that shit was hard too. You running is not comparable to the civil rights movement, Marianne, okay? And then so this is the second time I heard this because he was asked this question by Brian essentially another way. And he brought up man, in the South, man, shit, we didn't have to fight to vote and we've still fought back then. That is not comparable. Marianne Williamson's Vanity Project using electoral politics is not comparable to the civil rights era. And I feel like this is an answer we're going to hear quite a bit this year. Yes. Because this is a pattern. If you ask about how hard this is, bring up, man, MLK even had a really hard time. They said, shit, we never did get civil rights after Emmett Till. Look where we at now. Marianne, really? That's your answer.
Yeah, we went from Emmett Till to George Floyd. So there you go.
And to work around the system. And that is something we can do with these campaigns, especially Marianne's campaign, because there's a groundswell of people who want to support her, that are behind her. And so if we put the infrastructure, we put the investments in here, they rigged their primary.
Man, he knows, man. He knows what this is about. That's a fraudulent slip if I ever heard it. Got to put the investments.
Oh, it's not no fraudulent slip. Throughout this interview, he keeps saying stuff like that. You have to invest. He keeps saying stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes, they made it harder for us to win. So we have to be strong enough to have the willpower enough to have the hope enough to say, so what? I'm going to win anyway. And we have to develop that type of mentality that we're fighting for this stuff, even though we know it's rigged against us. The entire Southern political system is rigged against people that look like me. And we keep fighting and finding ways to win. And that's what we got to do. We have to keep the fight up, find our way to like.
You know that there's no receipts behind it. It's just literally a feeling.
Yes.
You have to just overcome your feeling of despair. Dude. That is simply it. Go ahead.
He literally, sorry, CJ, but he literally says it. Could we describe this shit as what would we say? We said HOPIUM. He literally said, we got to rely on hope. We got to rely on the power positive. We got to dig deep. This motherfucker sound like a junior varsity coach. Nigga, you talking about the resources of the working class challenging the system of capitalism, and he's giving a junior varsity speech. We got to dig deep, man. Believe in the power of positivity. We got to
remember the Titans.
Believe. We believe. Anyway, let's continue. I could not parody.
We know this is real. We know that's going to be a problem. So what can we do to find the solution to work around that?
What is the solution in a place? I mean, because you've described a lot of.
Bree, at that point, Bree was like, all right, come on, man. Bree was like, okay, what is the solution? Because at that point, that motherfucker sounded like Hulk Hogan at that point. So Bree was like, all right, come on, give us some answers.
Hulk Hogan.
I was thinking about, I forget the exact number, but it was something like 40, 50, 60% of Black voters in South Carolina said that the Clyburn endorsement was dispositive for them in voting for Joe Biden. Joe Biden has incredibly strong numbers for voters, Black voters over 60, older voters, generally speaking. There's something like 76% of all Black voters over 60 voted for Joe Biden. You've described the kind of time investments that are required to make a dent in the relationship structures that exist in South Carolina. So, what is the plan to break through?
The way they nodded and listen to Bree right now is like the first time they ever heard the shit. It's like this is what the first thing we came to. Remember when we was talking about the Marianne Williamson campaign? We was like, hey, yo, by the way, even if you was as radical as us, because we tried to argue things multiple ways. Because there's our position where don't organize within the Democratic Party. I don't give a fuck if you're about to win or not, right? Then I was like, all right, let's use your argument. If you believe that we should do that if you can win, what about South Carolina? That immediately came up to us. That's immediately a giant hurdle for you guys. They rigged the primary, moved South Carolina up, and you guys are going to get blown out after South Carolina, and then everyone's going to be like, oh my God, progressives can't win. You guys might as well drop out. And Briahna bring this up, and they're just looking like, oh shit, this is a good point. Like, y'all didn't consider this? Like, that's the first thing we considered. Let's see their answer. That's why I was laughing. It's like, bro, you guys did not even think about this? Like, it was the first thing I thought of. Like, how do you get over the South Carolina hub? If I still believe in the same strategy that I believe in 2018, that we should run presidential candidates in the Democratic Party, my first thought was like, damn, bro, they just changed the South Carolina rules. That's what I would be on. I won't be worried about RBN and what they feel about us. Like, that's like their main priority.
Do that.
I'll be worried about what the fuck we gonna do in South Carolina.
Hurdle.
But anyway, let's continue. I'm talking too much. Let's continue.
And to spend more time in the state, I guess it should have been started yesterday or a year ago, maybe even, but starting now at the very least. Like what do you see as the path to victory there?
What do I see as the path to victory here is like having Marianne come, having people hear Marianne and actually listen, like Carlos was saying. When people are giving her a chance and like hearing her and seeing her and interacting with her, they're coming on board. And so you got to do that. It's kind of tedious work, but it works.
Does that sound like a satisfying answer for you guys?
No.
So let me sum up what just happened here. So Bree brought up a very great point that we brought up all the time. What are you guys going to do about South Carolina? You got to have Jim Clyburn that will influence the election. This is what Bree is bringing up to him. Most voters in South Carolina said that Jim Clyburn decides their vote. What is your strategy to overcome this plan that defeated Bernie Sanders? And his answer was, man, they really don't know Marianne yet. Once Marianne gets down there, he's really going to show them. Does that sound like a fucking cohesive strategy? They have no idea what they're going to do about South Carolina. That's your strategy? Marianne Williamson going to come down there and all of a sudden be more influential than Tim Clyburn? All she had to do is just meet some people, shake some hands, and she's gonna overcome the endorsement.
How come that didn't work for Bernie Sanders then? How come that didn't work?
I was in South Carolina, fam. The team that we had, the resources that we pulled in South Carolina. Why do you guys think me and many people that was on the ground saying hard no to Marianne, nigga, if we lost in 2020, no one is replicating that. We have, despite what people say, we have massive on the ground communications and activism going on in South Carolina. I told you guys the story before. I met a dude that literally traveled from Sweden. We had people all over the goddamn country traveling to South Carolina. We had a giant base in Charleston. I was in Beaufort. I traveled to Charleston a few times. There were bases all over the fucking the state, and Bernie still got washed. But Marianne's gonna show up, and she's gonna smile at some people, and she's gonna do what Bernie couldn't do. Unserious.
Just unserious. So I fast forward to the next part. Again, I calibrated a little bit, so it's going to play like 20 seconds of before she gets to the question. So let's listen.
Bring in the people who just don't like body.
Let me ask both of you about that then. Carlos, I'm going to come to you first. Are there efforts being made to attract independent and Republican voters? And do you see any appeal that the Marianne is having, any kind of demonstrated appeal among those groups?
I have to say, I also want to address your first question about your listeners, viewers, maybe not being so excited about the Democrats.
Okay, so here he comes back to the question, and this is where he comes back to that initial question where the South Carolina rep has already answered, and he's going to answer it here. Now I remember.
Democratic Party. I can agree. I'm not excited about the DNC. I don't think anybody could be under the circumstances that we're living today. I'm excited about my party here in New Hampshire because we tend to do things much different than the DNC. And it's the obvious reason why they don't want us to go first. That is very crystal clear.
Oh my God.
So I'm not asking anybody to be excited about the DNC. What I'm asking them is to take control of their local parties. That's where the power is. That's where we're going to make change. That's how we're doing it here in New Hampshire. You know, I was able to win my election a couple of weeks ago.
This is something that even I used to fall for back in the day. When they say, all you got to do, there are people who believe in taking over the Democratic Party. They say, all you got to do is get in there in local politics. Take over your local Democratic Party. As if local Democratic Party politics is not rigged. You guys know what it would take to dethrone Emmanuel Cleaver in Kansas City? That boy is a mega house titan. And Quentin Lucas has a mega machine of real estate developers and landlords. That's why when people are like, Nick, we ever consider running for Congress? Like, nigga, you know who I'm going up against? Manuel Cleaver's like Jim Clyburn here. He got a whole fucking street named after him. Manuel Cleaver Boulevard. No fucking sitting congressman with streets named after him.
Yeah.
But people who are Democrats like, just take over the local Democratic Party. As if that shit is easy. Ask Nevada. The Democrat socialists in Nevada, how easy it is to take over the local Democratic Party. They literally just got ejected out of the party. We need a complete third party. This fantasy where there's good Democrats. Oh, in Philadelphia, there are good Democrats over there. The Democratic Party in San Francisco, man, trust me, they're open. No, nigga, third party. No local Democrat shit. That you guys are misleading people. And I'll be honest, guys, I used to say that shit too. I was like, we got local progressives running local races. Those local fucking races are rigged. Just like national races. But let's continue.
Yeah, he finishes up here, and then I have the final video before we close this segment, and I will have like 20 minutes left to cover the other one. So we got some time. Let's. But this is interesting. What he says coming up here.
I'm going to be the first Latino on that rules committee ever in the state of New Hampshire, and we're breaking barriers everywhere in New Hampshire. We just elected in a very red town a transgender man who's actually working for Marianne, who was an Elizabeth Warren supporter before. You know, I was a Bernie supporter before. We have somebody else from the Tulsi campaign, and this is an interesting point. We have people from all these camps that worked on all these different campaigns before joining Marianne, and Marianne has an ability to talk to Americans, not to talk specifically just to Black voters or to Hispanic voters or to Indigenous voters or to gay voters. She has an ability to speak to American voters. And that's something that she emphasizes a lot. And I think she's just different. She's able to attract those people. Also, Americans are tired of voting for the less of two evils. That is very crystal clear.
Look, guys, I
How is this not that? And Bree is about to kind of go into them right here. So let's listen. But how is that? I just want to pose. But let's listen to Bree's question right here.
appreciate all of this, and certainly, I guess I'm pushing back because I think that people don't want to, at least in this context, people listen to this episode, they are more familiar with Marianne than the average voter. They don't need to be convinced of what she stands for. Some people disagree with some of what she stands for. They disagree with some of her foreign policy takes. They agree with other parts of her or her domestic agenda or whatever it is. But the concerns are not about that. Ultimately, people, except for some people who I think the foreign.
He was like, "Yo, I heard that all that shit you guys just said. RBN crowd not buying none of that shit." That's hilarious. Tell me. No, trust me. These people know. These people know Marianne. These people know. The thing you guys just said was horrible, and I'm giving you guys a chance to try again. Well, I'm like Bree's anger translator there. That's literally what you're saying. You're saying it in a very nice way. What you guys just said was horrible and not going to win nobody over. So you guys
like y'all need more. You need more than this. So
yeah,
policy stuff is a deal breaker. Put them to the side. That's their choice. Other people are like, why should I invest in this again? Why should I give my donation to this again when the system is so rigged unless I'm being given like demonstrable changes in strategy that are likely to have a different to create a different outcome. So that's what I ask you, are there,
we're not going to
what's going on? Are there efforts being made? Is appealing to independent and Republican voters really a part of the strategy that's going to help in these open primary states? And if so, what does that look like? What is the infrastructure that's being put into effect on the ground in South Carolina that enables Marianne's time spent in the state to be most effective? Are there going to be efforts to try to meet with people like Jim Clyburn, who Bernie Sanders kind of famously said, I don't want to shake hands and wish happy birthday. Maybe that hurt him in certain parts of the country. Does Marianne have a different approach? When you say about New Hampshire, Carlos, that they do things differently there and they're not quite so beholden to the kind of these national politics, and you've said the same thing, Mercurius. What specifically does that mean? Help the listeners understand what opportunities you see, because I think that's on some level going to be much more persuasive to them than this idea that Marianne appeals to a lot of people. Like, we got that. Like, people know that. People here are familiar with Marianne.
I don't mean to be boring. The strategy in New Hampshire, it's not
it's not about you being boring. I just want you to make
you're not boring. You're not influencing anyone here. You're doing a horrible job. But let's continue. Just like, you're not boring. You sound like a shit lib.
Different audience than the normal audience, the more generalized audience that you are usually talking to.
The strategy in New Hampshire is not much different than what we did for Bernie, because it worked.
Sure.
And Progressive won. So there's no reason to change the wheel. New Hampshire.
Oh my Jesus fucking Christ.
I have another one up there. But we can end that interview on that for the sake of time, Nick. And because that was his answer, and it was completely terrible. That was his answer, and it was completely terrible. But the bigger question, I guess, would be, I'm sorry, it has it on Twitter, is that she said, listen, you try to sell me on Marianne just by telling me she's a great person. Forget all that. We need something else. And then he just says, we're doing the same thing. There's nothing else. That's him answering her question. There's nothing else, Bree. If it's not the candidate, then there's no other strategy. There's literally no other strategy that he's saying. We're going to do the same thing that Bernie did and lost.
But he said, we're going to fight harder. We try really hard. We come together and really believe we're going to overcome the same problems that Bernie had. That's what he said earlier before. Then when asked this question, we're doing the same thing Bernie did. Man, this is one hell of a hustle.